Homeschoolers of Reddit, what is your best culture shock moment? I was homeschooled until I started college, and honestly, I never experienced any form of culture shock. I was kinda surprised by how some students would crap talk the profs, who were just trying their best to teach a herd of grumpy freshmen, but other than that everything was business as usual. I know a lot of people don't believe this, but a lot of homeschooled kids share the same experiences as those who went to formal schools. Yes, social skills. No, homeschooling did not leave me a social cripple. Yes, I'm a normally functioning person. Homeschooled from kindergarten through 12th grade, so bona fide homeschooler here. To be honest, the only thing that I was fairly behind in was in anything carnal or physically related, like, embarrassingly so, to the point where I asked my adult cousin if she gave birth through her belly button when I was 14. Ouch. Fortunately, I eventually discovered Urban Dictionary, and my embarrassing questions ceased. In my defense, it wasn't entirely related to me being homeschooled, but more so to the fact that I was just an incredibly innocent individual, and when my friends would make a reference that went over my head, instead of helping me out a little, would simply smile and say, "You're so innocent, you wouldn't get it. Thanks." That's really it though. I had lots of friends and participated in sports and school events through the private school my homeschool group was a part of. To this day, when I mention that I was homeschooled, I get lots of shocked looks and exclamations of, "But you don't act homeschooled well." I have friends that are more innocent than me that went to public schools. So I think it is safe to say you really can't judge a person based purely on how they were educated. Urban Dictionary, the homeschooler's friend. How little actual learning mattered. I was homeschooled almost my entire school career aside from kindergarten, 3rd grade and 4th grade, but in high school I took some electives at an actual campus. Literally no one gave a frick about their studies. I had always paid extremely close attention to what I was learning and figured that was sort of the point. I had no idea there was such a huge emphasis on socializing. I'd come to class and people would want to hang out. I was like, what the frick for? I'm not here for fun. I'm here to get this class over with. Now that I'm older I can kinda see how I missed out on some of the more fun school stuff. On the other hand, I didn't have to deal with buttholes. So there's that. I started going to school when my parents got divorced. Grade 4 for me. I remember just getting up and leaving to go to the bathroom, then coming back and getting into a ton of trouble for not telling anyone. It was unfathomable to me that you had to ask to go to the washroom. It still doesn't make sense. I was homeschooled my whole life. I literally have no idea what the inside of an elementary, middle or high school looks like. I'm 22 and in college now, but I can't really say there were any real culture shocks. I had normal friends because I was always in some kind of sport club activity with them as well as other homeschoolers. There is a lot of misconception and misinformation about homeschooled kids. People always assume I'm a religious, sheltered, socially awkward person because of it, but I'm not. I'm just an average girl who started working a crappy job at a movie theater when I was 17 like all the other kids. I may not have a ton of friends because of it, but I love the ones I do have and I think I'm better off because of it. I forgot to add that my parents chose to homeschool my siblings and I because they aren't fans of the American school system and didn't want our education to rely on an underpaid and overstressed teacher. I learned a lot about myself in terms of what my passions and goals are and got an awesome jump start on them due the extra time I had in my day. There's definitely a right way and a wrong way to do it. This happened to one of my brother's friends. John was homeschooled until 9th or 10th grade. They went out to a sports bar or something to eat. Everybody ordered dinner and John ordered steak fries for dinner. My brother's group of friends kept asking why he ordered steak fries for dinner. When the fries came, he immediately bit into one, got a confused look on his face, and broke another one in half. But these are normal fries. His friends started cracking up when they realized that he thought steak fries were fries filled with steak. Homeschooled or trapped in his home 24/7. I grew up being homeschooled. My parents were insane Christian right-wing overprotective sheltering nut jobs. I never went to a public school in my life. Now I'm not saying that my mom sucked at teaching, but okay, yeah, she did. She would give me a stack of books and be like, learn. Okay, it wasn't quite like that but close. I learned absolutely nothing about school from my parents, and even less about life. When I was around 15 I started hanging out with people behind my parents' backs. Yes, they were crazy enough to try to control who I made friends with. Anyway, I always felt left out and different because for the longest time I just couldn't even function in social settings. I would just find a corner to be alone. Cue loneliness and depression. I started cutting and tried to kill myself a couple times. At 16 my parents ditched me and moved out of the country. I got together and 2 years later I'm still homeless. But I'm moving up. I'm a waiter and actually able to make conversation and act normal. Sorry for this being so long, but if you've actually read this all, then thanks. And please parents, future parents, don't do this to your kids. You may think you're helping them, but you couldn't be more wrong. Sorry for not exactly answering the question. I just felt like this should be shared. The cutting and suicide attempts weren't because of my parents' actions directly but from untreated clinical depression bipolar disorder. My biggest culture shock was how easy public school can be if you study. I had thought that I was going to come out of homeschooling and struggle through my middle school and high school years, miles behind the other kids. Turns out the other kids just cared about relationships. Okay, won't be true for all homeschoolers, but apparently a lot changes between 4th grade and college that you miss if you are isolated from the world that long. I think the most awkward was my first physical ed lesson of learning that a condom was not a hand wipe. First week of university, and the most damaging one is that deadlines are not guidelines. My profs will care if I do everything for my favorite class the first 2 weeks of school and try to do everything else later. Still, socially a lot of the pop culture references still confuse me. I know it's because I wasn't in the popular culture through my teenage years though. On the other hand, it doesn't bother me that much. In some ways it is a bit liberating. I have little motivation to learn about pop culture phenomena that I don't like and I'm excellent at ignoring them. My lack of understanding references and jokes and social cues in real time leads to some very unusual situations. I was homeschooled with my brother from 2nd grade until about high school. I began my freshman year as a 12YO because we were gifted students in rural Virginia. Both my parents did an amazing job providing my brother and I with a great education, and now he and I are doing great socially and academically. My parents kept me and my brother involved in sports and other clubs, so there were no huge issues with same-age social interaction. Sarcasm. Did not understand it existed, did not know how to use it. I still have some problems expressing it in my vocal tone, but I know it's an issue, so I try to avoid it unless I am around friends who know. Extremely gullible. I grew up around people I trusted. Family, friends and adults with little animosity. Neither my brother or I have much tolerance for people making extremely illogical and emotional decisions. Both of our parents were and are very good at making sure to talk things out with us and explain why rules are rules and why we can't do something. This has unfortunately led to some issues where people apply labels such as cold-hearted or Vulcan. Fashion. I literally did not understand why people would wear uncomfortable clothing to impress others. These days I have a good fashion sense, but damn it, all my fabrics are soft at least. I could go on, but really those were the big ones. There wasn't. Everybody assumed I had no contact with the outside world, when really through high school I was holding a 35-hour job, playing for the football team, and hanging out with friends who were from public schools and homeschoolers. A few guys from the football team tried to make it a thing to pick on me for it, but then they suddenly realized nobody gave a crap that I didn't go to their school and they looked like idiots for trying. Funny, somewhat related story. If something happened during practice, like the coach seeing you slacking or he heard you got in trouble in school, after conditioning when everyone else finished you got an ordinarily. As in, ordinarily you'll be done, but you owe me more. You also weren't allowed to ask what it was for, because you were expected to figure it out fast and address it. Typically there would be 3-4 players every practice who would get them out of the 50 on the team, so if you were putting the effort in you had a good chance of staying off the list. One day my name is on the list. Oh well, whatever, I'll do it. Though I really wasn't sure what I had done wrong. Next day I get called again, which was weird, because all day I had been really focused on my form and effort to fix whatever I had done wrong the day before. This goes on for a week and a half. I get called every single day and for the life of me I can't figure out why. I'm no star player but I'm not lazy either and I knew what I was doing on the field. At this point my teammates are asking me what's going on. Nobody had ever been put on the list for so long, but I didn't have a clue. The coach also seemed to be getting increasingly frustrated with me for still ending up on the list every day. Finally 2 weeks later, we are in the post-practice huddle, right before ordinary start, and he's about to call the list and stops. He looks right at me and says, "Glow-in-the-dark ninjas, aren't you tired of being on the ordinary list every single day?" "Yes, coach." "And have you figured out why you're on there every day?" "No, coach. I've been checking the sign-in list, and since I started you haven't been to study hall." "Coach, I don't go to school here." The whole team laughed and all I got was an "Oh, I forgot about that." Well, that explains it. Homework. I couldn't wrap my brain around needing to complete extra assignments after my school day was over. I was not happy to find that it counted for a third of my grade. Wow, I feel a lot less alien, knowing you guys also fight this instinct. I want to add that my ideas of authority figures really came a lot from books I read. I gorged on books, and LeVar Burton and Mr. Rogers. I thought they were the rule. Still a shock that teacher or other authority figures could possibly not be right. So many times this has burned me. I was barricaded from the world, so no television, no radio, not even allowed to play with neighborhood kids. That was until I was 11. Parents divorced. Now, frick. 21 years later I still can't absorb that people with authority could be wrong or malicious. Does not compute. I just want you to know, I read your story. I was homeschooled from the 5th grade on. I also went to a homeschooled group for my entire school career. Besides some kids being insanely sheltered, most everyone was the same as everyone else who went to public schools. We just spent one day a week getting our schoolwork and learning a few things in classes. It wasn't so bad overall and I still have friends from there. Sometimes I wonder what public school would have been like, but well. Homeschooled all my life. No great stories to tell from my end. I'm just happy this topic exists. My mom was a huge networker, so I had a ton of interaction with other homeschoolers. There are basically 3 types of kids who are homeschooled: too smart, too dumb, and too sheltered, usually religious parents. Some of the sharpest minds I've met were homeschoolers, and some of the most appalling helicopter parenting too. A lot of homeschool groups like to get together and make pseudo schools. I avoided that crap like the plague. Hey, I see a Black Panther. The homeschool prom is in 2 months. Are you planning on going? Who in their right mind imagined that was a good idea? I have no clue. Or the fake graduation ceremony with fake certificates. I stayed at home and watched ESPN that day. Fricking. It was a super sin that promised hellfire and brimstone. Went to my first party in college under duress from my best friend who knew I needed it and walked in on a couple fricking in the laundry room. I just stood there shocked, then walked to the backyard and peed in the pool because it was my first time drunk as well. A month later I ended up losing my virginity to a woman 6 years my senior and started what amounted to a frick addiction. Be careful what you make taboo for kids. Not being able to cope with that stuff maturely can really haunt you later. Definitely how cold people can be. I have never been around a bunch of people who weren't my family and who were not looking out for my greater good. I never knew people use other people. High school was a shocker for me in that regard. For me, it's often what non-homeschoolers don't understand or do. My homeschool group is like a high school to me, so we have our inside jokes and culture, and I forget how not everyone else has the same pop culture. Like, every homeschooler I have met has seen The Princess Bride and LOTR way too many times. We have our own schoolwork rants about popular homeschool curriculum. We'll make jokes about homeschool stereotypes, etc. So I'll say something like "that's so homeschooled" to someone who isn't, and they either get it regardless, or ask me to explain, and explaining a joke like that never really works. From my school there is a small Catholic private school across the street. My school is class sizes 30-50. They have 5. They may as well be homeschooled. The Catholic school only goes to 8th grade. Freshman year they come over. Now picture a bunch of unknowing kids learning about all this fricking and drugs and crap that's normal for the first time. The difference crossing the street is huge. I wonder what it's like. I missed this. I was homeschooled K-12 in a very religious household. I grew up thinking gay people were going to heck, and Democrats were godless. That changed around the time I started going to college at 15. I think the biggest shock, though not necessarily related to culture, was finding out how much bigger the world is than the one I shared with my family. I've essentially rejected everything my parents taught me for a much more balanced worldview. I blame Bill Nye the Science Guy. That racism was a real thing. I'm white, my mum is white, and my dad is part black. Most of my friends were international students, and my best friends are Korean and Kenyan. I went to Mississippi to visit some friends, and went to their school to check it out. I heard lots of xenophobic jokes about some of the other students, and thought maybe it was just playful teasing. I remember that this is real moment of awareness. Honestly, I'm 23, been through college, and still feel like I'm still not adjusted. Probably the biggest one was when I told a girl I didn't want coffee after a date. I was 19. My buddy explained that one to me and we hooked up after the next date. Apparently I probably will always feel like I never fit it. Oh well. I've been reading this book called Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and I think I'm okay with not fitting in. I am British. I have never met or heard of anyone being homeschooled. Is it just an American thing or do we not do it in my area? I am British too and it does exist over here, just very rarely. I only met one person in my life who was homeschooled. This was at college and he was awesome, albeit very socially awkward. I grew up in rural Georgia and was homeschooled up to 8th grade before my parents divorced. We had just moved to a big city in Florida and I was coming into the last year of middle school. For everyone else. First part of my 8th grade first day. 1. The awkward bus ride. My sister and I had fervently devoted Sunday night to learning the correct school bus number, the route to the middle school, etc. We get to the bus stop Monday morning and awkwardly stood by ourselves since the neighborhood kids had all known each other for so long. Well, after some tense moments the bus arrives. But to our horror the school bus number is not the one that we had read the night before. Everyone starts funneling into the bus but my sister and I. At this point all the kids are looking at us waiting for us to do something. The bus driver yells for us to get on. My sister starts crying and runs away. Mom drives us to school later. The scantron. So I'm sitting in my first period history class on that same day and we are doing some assessment and the teacher hands out scantron forms for us to use. Because I at the time had no natural hesitation to ask questions, I raise my hand and ask what this scantron is and what I do with it. The class turns around and looks at me like I have 4 heads. The music. I grew up in a conservative Baptist household where the riskiest music that might be played is a Michael Card album. Cue acoustic Christian music. I remember being on the bus my first week and everyone listening to Limp Bizkit and the song came on that said frick like 40 times. First, I didn't know what it meant and was just totally shocked at how violent it all sounded. The awkward movie date. So, at some point that year I end up going on some date with 2 girls to a movie theater. At the time I really had no clue it was any type of date. The girls start kissing me and actually go down and start yanking at my belt. Looking back that would have been an awesome experience. At the time you'd think Satan himself had risen up and was pulling me into the depths of heck. I immediately stood up and pushed them away and moved seats. Later that week I confessed to my youth minister and cried. So there you go. These are my initial memories of homeschooling culture shock. Hope you've enjoyed my pain. The lack of deductive reasoning. I just don't see it from my friends. I was homeschooled through high school and reading and deductive reasoning were the most emphasized subjects. Not a homeschooler but worked for Apple a few years ago. During the summer they hold camps, basically days where school groups can bring in kids and have them create projects using the computers and Apple's suite of software. Usually a fun experience. Kids would be kids, teachers would be run ragged and everyone had fun. This homeschooled group of 10-year-olds was completely different. At 7 AM we started seeing parents line up outside the store with their children, but the kids didn't move. They weren't bouncing around, they were just standing with their parents. Then we opened the door and gave them a warm welcome which consisted of everybody in the store standing at the front tables, clapping and cheering people into the store. If you've been to a store opening or product launch, You've seen this happen. So we start clapping and the kids all freeze. They didn't know how to comprehend what was going on. They either refused to step foot into the store until their parents did and clung to their legs for dear life, or they reluctantly walked in crying their eyes out. Least successful welcome ever. Then the creatives started showing them the computers and got the kids rolling with their project. Kids didn't make a noise. You heard the clicking of keyboards and that's it. It was awkward and weird. They didn't socialize, didn't interact, and when they spoke it was whispered. That day, the Apple Store resembled a library rather than a retail store. I was homeschooled until my 10th grade year. I would say the biggest shocker for me was how much it was nothing like my mom said. I had been led to believe school was non-stop work, homework and studying. I was given the impression that I had it easy being homeschooled, even though I wasn't allowed to take advantage of any of the perks of being homeschooled, like doing work when I wanted, sleeping in, etc. I remember my first day of school. I was just surprised at how relaxed and kind of unorganized things were. I would say when my homeroom teacher said frick, the first day was a pretty big shocker. I couldn't believe how many kids had cell phones and cars and clothes that were obviously paid for by their parents. I never could understand the severe interest people had in each other's personal lives and who said what and who gives a frick. They spoke openly about evolution, which was great. BC, I had never heard any unbiased thoughts on it. Bedside Stevie in the internet. I wasn't ever around people who understood science and spoke about it openly without some taboo vibe going on. I guess just the fact that everyone was allowed their own opinion and it was okay to be wrong as long as you learned from it. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.